Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for coming to Lunch with Lisa. It is Thursday, and we are all still surviving. As always, I have our poll up there about how you are surviving from home. And it was really interesting because yesterday, and maybe this is just our different audiences, but yesterday, double the number of people were loving working from home than the day before. So interested to see how you're doing today. It's a little bit gray, but it is definitely, we're going into an important weekend. This has been a holy week, and on all fronts and with most religions. And so not that today I'm looking at this as so much of a religious type of webinar as much as it is about thinking about our children and how all of this is affecting them, and that there's hope and there's faith and there's all these different methods for them to be able to express themselves that we might not be thinking about right now. And when I thought about inviting my friend Kiefer to come on, and I've been so inspired by the book she wrote called Drawing God, right? And we're going to talk about drawing God today. But if you just think about your children and whether they're small or whether they're teenagers, I have my son's home from college, they're all absorbing this information differently. But they are seeing us work from home, and they know that they're not going to school. And they're hearing how many people have died every day on the news. And there's a different level of stress. All of our routines are different. Our patterns are off. And there might be things that there might be things our children are thinking about that they don't know how to express. And so I hope that everybody's able to take some great sort of nuggets of thought as we go into this weekend of things that we can do with our children to help them talk and help them talk about how they feel, and that then they can take these tools and use them for the rest of their lives. And again, that's what this webinar is all about, is that the idea is that I'm giving you 25 minutes, or not just me, actually my guests are giving you 25 minutes every day of something to just help you think differently and refresh your brain. So with that, I'd like to introduce my friend Kiefer. Karen is the author of the children's book, Drawing God, which captured the faith and imaginations of both young and old and inspired a worldwide Drawing God movement. So now November 9th is World Drawing God Day, right, Karen? And you've been doing this in 9 different countries. Actually, most recently, the last trip that I was on, I was in Los Angeles with my daughter a couple months ago. And what do you know, I'm taking the red eye back, and there's Karen getting on the same plane. And we had an opportunity to catch up and talk about Drawing God. Little did we know we'd be doing a webinar couple months later about this. But Karen is also the director of the Church in the 21st Century Center at Boston College, and also the founder of Spread the Bread, which I would love, Karen, for you to talk about a little bit, an award-winning nonprofit organization, the creator of the annual Mission Misfit Sock March event to take a stand against bullying while celebrating differences. So Karen, you have tackled a lot of different topics and subjects, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to writing the book, Drawing God.
Lisa, thank you so much for inviting me to be here, and thank you to everyone that's listening right now to just kind of taking the time out at lunch. I have to be honest with you. I didn't intend to write Drawing God. I didn't set out to write a children's book, but I guess God had different plans. It all started, you were just talking about conversation, how important conversations are with each other and with our children, and of course with God through prayer. But conversations change things, and they can change things for the better, and they can change things for the worse. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up doing, just about 2 years ago, a quick grocery store run to the Stop and Shop on a Sunday afternoon, just trying to get ready for the week. And I'm in the produce section, and I overhear these 2 little kids talking. And one kid says to the other, "My mother said you shouldn't talk about God at school because it makes people feel uncomfortable." And I just kind of stopped and thought, oh no, are we there? Are we at a point in time where our little ones are getting the message that God is uncomfortable? Talking about God is uncomfortable. When for me, right. God personifies comfort, So right. That's how it all started. I just couldn't shake that conversation.
Right. And it might have been that they didn't say don't talk about God. It might have been religion. It might have even been something else. And this goes back to how children hear things, right? And how this starts to shape their dialogue and how they feel. And if they're feeling uncomfortable talking about something at school, then they're not going to feel comfortable even in their own self thinking about something. So So I love that you tapped into that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I, like I said, it just stuck with me, and I started to kind of like have this conversation with God. Like, we've got to do something. Like, we have to try to figure out a way to get more kids talking about God and feeling comfortable talking about God. And, what does that look like? And, we live out in suburbia here, and there's lots of woods. And so lots of walks and lots of talks with God for me. And then one Sunday morning I came home and I just started to think about this story, and started writing this story, Drawing God. And I have to be honest with you, I used my third daughter, Emma, who's the main character in the book, as my muse, because she's probably one of the most creative people I've ever met. And I thought, wow, let's have Emma lead this story. And it's really about a little girl who goes to the art museum. And she's so inspired by the drawings of Picasso that she decides in that moment she's going to draw something beyond spectacular. And she starts to think about, like, what would that be? What would be beyond spectacular? And then she hears almost God's whisper, basically saying, draw God. And so sure enough, Emma decides she's going to draw God. And she has a really hard time because no one can see God in any of her drawings. And it's so frustrating.
But God could be, go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead, Liz.
Well, but God can mean so many different things. I mean, in the book, they draw the sun and it means God, right? They draw bread, it means God. One of our viewers is asking, do you think that this correlates the trend towards less organized religion? The lack of probably the lack of discussion, right? And the fact that we can't talk about things at school. Do you have thoughts on that? And actually, is that something that you're seeing, maybe even as the church in the 21st Century Center? Is that something that you're seeing?
I think people need help. And I think that they're looking for gentle ways to talk to their kids about God. And I can't tell you, Lisa, how many parents have said to me, I'm afraid to have a conversation about God because I'm afraid my child's going to ask me a question that I can't answer. And the whole Drawing God project, the whole message of the project is that we all see God differently. So for parents, you can't lose, because you see God differently right now than you might see God tomorrow. And you mentioned in the book about how Emma draws the sun. And then her friends can't see God in the sun. And then Emma, draws a picture of the bread that her mother bakes, and the classmates can't see God in the bread. And then she draws this beautiful heart. She draws it so hard that her crayon disappears because God is love, and they can't see that. And then what happens is there's a transformation in the book where Emma actually talks to God and asks for help and says, please help me help them see you. And then the next day she wakes up and she realizes that she doesn't care if they can't see God in her drawings. Like, she knew she drew God. God knew she drew God, and maybe Picasso too. And then what happens is, I don't want to give away the story, but we're going to give away the story, because by the end of the book, Emma goes back into school, and here she is thinking that she's been like really marginalized by all of her friends. But she goes back to school that following Monday, and all of her friends are drawing God, and every picture is different.
There was something that you mentioned a few minutes ago, and I want to touch on this because I think it's really important. And I'm going to share a story. It's a vulnerable moment, right? Story that I grew up in a Catholic family, and I went to CCD, religious ed, confirmations, married a Catholic man. Went to a Catholic college, but I had friends that are Jewish. And when you and I were talking about this the other day, I realized there were so many times I didn't ask questions about a holiday, or I didn't ask questions about things that I knew were happening because I felt ignorant that I wasn't asking it right, or that I wasn't referencing it right. And then therefore I didn't say anything, which is wrong. And I think what you're trying to say here is that we don't always know how to talk about things with our children, whether it's again, whether it's about God or anything around that, again, back to hope and faith and fear and these different things. And that sometimes we just need the tools to open those conversations, right? And we also need the permission to ask questions, right?
And I'll also say, and the courage to ask them, and the courage to be wrong,
right.
without trying to offend someone. But I'm listening a lot to not only the children that I'm drawing God with, but to the parents. Mm-hmm. And we put forward this new project called the Friendship Project. And it's basically trying to use the book and basically teach kids, what if God were one of us? So that they can see God in each other. They can see God in their friends, and they can see God in maybe their friends that don't call God God. And it's an opportunity to have these kinds of conversations. How wonderful would it be for a 6-year-old to have these conversations and then continue to have these conversations as they journey, instead of having them when you're 60,
Well, one of the things going into this weekend, and for many people, tomorrow is Good Friday, and it's a banking holiday, so they're not working. And for the first time ever, we're not rushing around to different families' homes and cooking these, or maybe we are cooking big meals, but we're not running around, right? And there's more time to sit and maybe think and do things. And one of the things I thought was such a great suggestion is that people can take this opportunity to sit with their children and be able to talk to them about how they're feeling in a way that's not, well, how are you feeling? And are you scared of this? But you said that somebody could draw, well, what does God mean? But what does fear mean? And if you start talking about what fear meant, and you start talking about, what love means, and you just have a session where you're drawing, the conversation that we could learn is so phenomenal, and an opportunity for us to do this in a time when we can reflect on what's happening, and maybe how we can take more time and not leave our children's mental health right now to their computer and to their phone and to their video games, which a lot of them we know are on right now because it's keeping them busy.
That's exactly right. And, that's what we all have in common right now, right? We all have a little bit more time and more time to kind of have these great conversations that can change things, and I really believe that an investment in just having conversations and drawing is a gentle way to have big, memorable conversations. When I'm talking to kids at school, Lisa, or, out at parishes, when I talk to them and I say, God gave you 3 friends, your heart, your mind, and your imagination. And they all work together in their beautiful gifts. And then they kind of look at me like, But then I do this little exercise with them, and you can, those that are listening today can do it with their kids. I just say, for 10 seconds, all I want you to do is close your eyes and think about ice cream. Mm-hmm. And so they do that. And then 10 seconds later, they open up their eyes, and I say, anyone want to share with me what your ice cream looked like? And of course, I call on 5 or 6 students, and they realize that every vision of ice cream in their imagination is different. And then I say, you see, you love vanilla ice cream. Your heart told your mind, and your mind worked with your imagination. The next thing you know, you had 3 scoops of vanilla ice cream and a waffle cone with a cherry on top.
Right.
And that's how we see God. Mm-hmm. Everyone sees God differently, which is just fun. And that frees us. I mean, as parents, you have a lot of kids. I have 4 kids. I mean, it's hard enough. It's just kind of fun to grab onto a project. Like I said, you can't fail. If anything, you open something up. And in the book, as you mentioned, when Emma draws the sun, God's in nature. Like, go out for an Easter walk or a Passover walk and look for God. God's in bread. Bake. Everyone has maybe a favorite loaf of bread or a favorite cookie that was passed down in their family. Tell your children why it mattered to you. And say, that's a God wink. That's a God moment. And then, of course,
you had talked about how this also brings comfort to children, right? So they may not even know they're having an anxiety or something. And then again, back to this being a tool for them, now they're expressing and they're doing, and they're learning a tool for managing their feelings and managing. If you ever watch your child's doodle, you can learn from their doodles sort of what they're thinking. And I think that's so important. You had also said that you created a program around drawing God for this time around the COVID-19 crisis. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's called Be Not Afraid. And you can, I think it's in the handout section of this webinar, but then also on our website. And you just download it, and it's an opportunity to sit down and talk to your kids about, like, it starts off like, what does hope mean to you? That's a big question for a little kid, but guess what? They can teach us so much what hope means to them. What does peace in the world mean to you? And then you kind of journey into what scares you.
Right.
And they're drawing all the way. And then what comforts you? And then, like, one little kid drew a picture of his father. And it's an opportunity to say, Dad comforts you. Do you see God in Dad? Because God's in each one of us. And we're made in the image and likeness of God. And that, again, you can go as far as you want in these conversations. But the idea kit's there. The little frames that you download are there. And you are in the driver's seat. And Jesus, take the wheel.
And then that's all at the website drawing-god.com, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
The other really cool thing is that there's a virtual museum of pictures. And again, you've got National Drawing God Day, and people all over the world were drawing these pictures. Talk us through that, because I was really surprised when I went to the website. I didn't know about the virtual museum, and I thought that was really neat to walk through.
Well, when the book first came out, Lisa, in October, I worked with our publisher, Pericles Press, and I wanted to make sure that the book was a verb, that it was going to challenge people to act in a beautiful way. And I don't know that books can change the world. I mean, I guess they can. Look at Harry Potter, but the people that read them can. And so I thought, if we could do World Drawing God Day in November, let's see what happens. And then it was extraordinary. The number of kids and adults that were drawing God and sending in their images. And then we were in the season of Advent, and I'm getting more and more pictures, and I'm thinking, I want to share these pictures in, like, one place. Everyone can see them. And then, of course, you Google virtual museums, and we downloaded this, like, software. It was free, and we built this virtual museum to display all the masterpieces.
Wow. One of the questions we have is, what is your religious background, if you don't mind them asking?
Oh, no, I'm Irish Catholic, and grew up right around here in Boston. And but I'm a big believer in recognizing so many faiths, because we learn so much from them, and we learn so much from our kids, frankly. One tidbit about the virtual museum, Lisa, is for parents that are out there. If your child is drawing God, and again, all the resources are on the website, feel free to send in their image, because as of April 17th, we're accepting masterpieces, and then we're actually building an annex onto the virtual museum, and it's going to be our Easter exhibit. So I
love that you call them masterpieces.
They are. They're masterpieces. One little kid said to me, he showed me this picture, and it was like this black scribble and then this brown swirly ness. And he said to me, see my picture of God? And I said, that's beautiful. And he said, it might look like a mess, but it's actually the Holy Spirit. And he was 6.
Because that's how he felt about it.
That's right. Doesn't we look at our world and we see a mess, but God is with us to comfort us and kind of move us forward, So interestingly, one of our
viewers also noted that mac and cheese is what he would draw. And I think that's funny. We had Sarah Wade on yesterday, Chef Sarah Wade, and one of her specialties is her mac and cheese, and she calls it comfort food. And for so many of us, we find comfort in food. We find comfort in exercise. We find comfort. And again, this is just another tool for finding comfort, right? And for being able to express ourselves in a different way. And I completely understand what Stephen Kenny's saying about mac and cheese, but we all have our different things that we do, right? So
that's exactly right. And mac and cheese is the beatific vision of whatever, good for that person. I mean, it's all good. But now there's an excellent example of how you can connect mac and cheese to God, and do it in a really easy way, in a gentle way, you know?
Right. Well, and it goes back to feeling comfortable and being able to take care of yourself and have another tool to do so. We have 5 minutes left. These go very, very quickly. And, real quick, if I looked at the poll and if you haven't responded yet, please do so. But right now we're at 55%, which is now the highest of people saying they like working from home. So I think that we're in for a dramatic shift in our lives as to how we work and what we do. And, I thank you for joining us and sharing that, because I think this is where so many are coming now during lunchtime so that we can take a check on where we are with things and learn something new to help us through this whole change in the way the world might work. Another question, it seems that, forgive me today, because I have to move this a little bit. I moved my camera and now I'm having a tough time seeing my own chat. It seems that organized, structured religion has gotten less prevalent. Do you feel this is applicable and helps a dialogue with the current generation? And with 4 minutes left, I encourage anybody who has questions to ask them now. That would be great. But Karen, have a thought on that?
Well, I work at Boston College and work with a lot of young people. My oldest daughter is 25 years old. She made her first communion when the sexual abuse crisis broke in the church. So that 25-year-olds, there were a lot of fallen away young people and even parents that are kind of done with organized religion, but there's still this like extraordinary thirst. There's something missing, and they want this connection. I think we see that now in the pandemic and in the way that we're ministering to people online. So I think the thirst for religion is very real and very much needed. But at the same time, I also don't want to be preachy. I think people just need to figure out what works for them. And for this project, if this works and it's a gentle way to have a beautiful conversation, a walk, a baking session, a reading session, whatever it is. And like the best advice I can give, like as a parent of 4, is like, we just have to be more gentle with ourselves too. There's so many expectations for all of us. It's so much. And to just like be reminded that we're doing great. We're doing the best we can, Well,
I think that's something people could think about, particularly this weekend. It's so easy to go online and, we've got a buy now up right now. You can click right on. You can send it to other people as in I'm thinking of you and I'm giving you a tool with your children. We would have loved to have every parent in the country on this webinar today, but I think if everybody could share a little bit of what they learned today with their friends and their family, it gives us all something to think about. And I think, I'm referencing children, but, I know even in my own home, when Bob's super stressed, he paints, right? And he sits and he paints and he makes these masterpieces of his own and then he gives one to each of his kids and it's a gift and it's his time and his imagination. And so, so many people find that just sitting with a pen and paper or paint or whatever it is a really great way to find comfort and to find another sense of self, right?
To celebrate that, right? Celebrate those expressions, those gifts with your kids. Hang their masterpieces everywhere and send them into the virtual museum. It would be fun to go on and see their pictures hanging in the annex.
I agree. Does anybody have any other questions or anything for Karen?
I will say too that there's a lot of young kids that are not going to be making their first communion in May, and we're introducing a new project for them next week on the website. So
great.
Again, an opportunity to have a great conversation and be creative using our imagination and with bread in the Eucharist.
Well, thank you, Karen. I really appreciate your sharing this, and I always tell everybody I can about the book, and I think there's so much that we can learn from it. And so thank you for taking the time to come on and talk to people. All of these videos have now been transcribed and have been subtitled. So they're going to start going up on YouTube so you can watch them again or you can share them with other people. So we're really excited about that. And then for, again, those of you who probably have children would be the most interested, but tomorrow we have Cody Newman on, and she is a 14-year-old singer-songwriter from Charleston, South Carolina, and she is a radio Disney artist. She was actually named a radio Disney artist in 2019 and featured by Billboard as part of their Breakout Artist series earlier this year. She fell in love with music at the age of 6. She is unbelievably talented. she loves singing, songwriting. She plays guitar, ukulele, piano, violin, a tiny bit of drums.
Whoa.
She's performed all over. And let's see, she is currently a high school freshman at as a vocal major at her local charter arts school, and has released her debut EP, End of Infinity, in September of 2019. So her manager let me know that she now has she's working with Cardi B's booking agent. He said this might be the last regular interview she does. Well, I hope he's right, because she is super crazy talented. I'm super fortunate to have her on tomorrow, and I really encourage you to bring your kids and show them the webinar and show them that really their dreams can come true. If they love doing something, they can make it happen. And Cody's only 14, so I think she's going to be really great to watch tomorrow with a bunch of kids. So I want to thank everybody for coming on today. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.